Hey guys, tonight we're traveling far back in time past the Roman emperors, past the Greek philosophers, all the way to the edge of the Nile River, under a sky powdered with stars, where reeds whisper and clay homes glow with faint oil lamplight. You're barefoot. The air smells like silt and sweet fig smoke, and your linen tunic clings just slightly in the humidity. You've wandered into ancient Egypt, and, well, if you're hoping to survive here, you'd better start thinking about babies. Not because you're about to have one, though. Maybe you are, but because this entire civilization kind of hinges on them. Fertility was more than biology. It was a divine obsession, a source of social pride, and a royal necessity. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your location and local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking through a village just waking up to the soft drumbeat of temple gongs. Mud brick homes line the riverbanks, and palm trees sway lazily above rooftops. A group of women crouch at the water's edge, not washing clothes, but tossing handfuls of crushed herbs into the river and whispering prayers under their breath. These aren't just idle rituals, these are invocations, appeals for life to spark within. Fertility here isn't left to chance. The gods are everywhere. Hathor, the cow-headed goddess of motherhood, grins from wall carvings and statue niches. Tolweret, part hippo, part crocodile, and fully terrifying, guards thresholds to keep evil spirits at bay. She may look like she stumbled out of a fever dream, but to ancient Egyptians, she was the ultimate pregnancy protector. Even everyday life is soaked in symbolism. Every meal, every bath, every offering is a small gesture toward creating balance, Mayat. They call it a harmony that keeps death, disease, and dishonor at bay. You can't just want a child. You have to deserve one. And that involves everything from obeying temple rules to planting your vegetables just right. You pass an elderly woman painting a small wooden figurine with ochre and crushed malachite. She's not an artist. She's crafting a fertility charm, one that may sleep beneath a pillow tonight, hoping to coax a dream of conception. Down by the grain store, another woman lifts her baby into the air and sings a lullaby older than the pyramids themselves. The baby coos, gurgles, completely unaware of the centuries of hope and ritual that brought it here. The Nile itself is a symbol of fertility. Its floods are predictable, generous, life-giving, just like a successful womb flooded at the right time, yielding abundance. That's no metaphor to the Egyptians. It's theology. You might wonder how people kept track of time. Cycles. Bodily changes back then. The truth. They did meticulously. Women recorded the timing of their monthly bleeds using scratch stone tablets or counting knots on string. There were rituals for welcoming the blood and other, more private ones for when it vanished, especially if it vanished late. Even the architecture reflects this priority. In many homes, a small corner near the sleeping area is reserved for a fertility altar. A little shelf with an oil lamp, carved figures, and maybe even a dried flower or two. In the elite homes, they've got entire rooms where midwives would sleep, where incense was burned nightly, and where women would whisper their secrets into the stone. And it's not just women carrying this weight. Husbands, fathers, even priests perform their own rites to prepare the household. There's a subtle but present understanding that while women bear the physical burden, the spiritual one is shared, but still no one says it out loud when pregnancy doesn't come. The blame almost always falls on her. As night falls, you pass a quiet courtyard. A couple sits beside a flickering lamp, fingers entwined, eyes hopeful but tired. They've been trying. Maybe this time it worked. Maybe not. There's no pregnancy test to rip open. No pink lines. Just waiting, wondering, and praying to gods with animal faces and unsettling grins. Historians still argue whether Egyptians truly believed in the efficacy of their rituals, or if they simply clung to them for comfort. But either way, the pattern is clear. Hope, ritual, silence, repeat. And so, as the village settles in under a silver moon, you feel the weight of centuries pressing gently against your thoughts. Generations of women and men, whispering the same hopes into the dark. You curl up under a blanket that smells faintly of sandalwood and river mud. Outside, a jackal howls just once. You don't need to be afraid. An amulet hangs above your door. Toweret is watching. Morning arrives not with an alarm clock, but with the hush of water against stone as the Nile stirs to life. You blink beneath linen folds, ears tuned to the clatter of clay pots and the soft murmur of women already at work. Your thoughts drift back to last night, to the flickering lamp, the praying couple, and the unspoken question, how did the ancients know if someone was pregnant? The answer, surprisingly, isn't a complete mystery. You rise and wander to the edge of a small courtyard, where an older woman crouches beside a woven basket filled with barley and emmer wheat. She's not baking. She's conducting a pregnancy test, older than anything in a pharmacy aisle. The procedure is simple. A woman suspected of being pregnant urinates onto 2 handfuls of grain. 1 barley, 1 emmer. If either sprouts in the following days, she's pregnant. If the barley grows faster, she's likely carrying a boy. If the emmer sprouts, a girl. If nothing happens, well, back to praying. Now, here's the part that blows your modern mind a little. Recent experiments found that yes, the hormones in urine can accelerate seed germination. It's not 100% reliable, but it's no snake oil either. In a time before microscopes or ultrasounds, this was ancient science quiet, clever, and cultivated through generations. You step back, half impressed, half skeptical. It seems so quaint, yet oddly dignified. No peeing on plastic, no corporate logos promising early detection. Just nature, intuition, and a little barley in a basket. Beside you, a young girl giggles. She's watching the barley too, not because she's being tested, but because she knows the results will ripple through the house. A pregnancy means offerings, preparations, and maybe even a festival if the child is born under a lucky star. There's an old song, half lullaby, half charm like, that women begin humming the moment the grains sprout. But the stakes are high. Infertility was more than a personal disappointment. It could mean shame, ostracism, or divine punishment. That's why some women, particularly in noble families, turn to more extreme methods. You pass a small shrine tucked inside a midwife's chamber. It's dimly lit, lined with animal bones, dried herbs, and a strange clay idol with sharp teeth. This midwife doesn't only help with birth, she helps with conception. She mixes potions from crocodile fat, dates, and honey. She applies paste to a woman's thighs while chanting in a language even she doesn't fully understand. One such mixture, brace yourself, involved honey and powdered dung. Supposedly, it encouraged fertility. Or maybe it just scared the evil spirits away with the smell? Either way, it was applied with solemn care, like a kind of holy armor. Some recipes are even more bizarre. Crushed beetles, ash from burned linen, or oil infused with hippo liver. It's tempting to scoff. But then again, you've probably eaten kale voluntarily. Historians still argue whether these recipes were believed to work medically or if they were symbolic rituals performed for psychological comfort. Either way, the act itself was what mattered: the commitment, the hope, the physical expression of longing. Not all pregnancy signs were left to grain baskets. There were other methods. Some midwives believed they could tell just by the glow of the skin or the sound of a woman's voice. One tale even speaks of using onions, placing one in a woman's, well, let's say, a sensitive area overnight. If her breath smelled of onion in the morning, the path was open, and conception was likely. If not, perhaps there was a blockage. You can't help but smile at that. Imagine waking up next to someone and sniffing their breath like a garlic sommelier. Still, each test had its purpose, and each was performed with the same mix of solemnity and hope. In a world without proof, belief becomes its own form of truth. Outside the village, in temple schools, scribes recorded these methods onto scrolls, not just for doctors, but for priests, for apprentices, and for curious nobility. One papyrus even included a list of symptoms: nausea, swollen ankles, sensitive breasts, and somewhat randomly an aversion to fish with bad smell. You chuckle. Some things never change. You pause beside the barley basket once more. Nothing yet. Just seeds, damp and quiet. But beneath the surface, something is stirring. A hope, a signal, a life perhaps waiting to sprout. As evening draws near, a breeze picks up. The women cover the basket with linen and whisper a blessing. You feel the air shift around you soft, anticipatory, like the world is holding its breath. You head home slowly, the sound of insects rising with the dusk. Above, the stars return watching, blinking, remembering. And so you wonder, as you curl back beneath your linen blanket, what the barley will say tomorrow. The next morning, your footsteps crunch lightly over packed earth as you head toward the courtyard. You can already hear soft chatter from the women gathered around the woven basket. One of them is humming as that same old song, half lullaby, half incantation, floats gently in the warm morning air. You peer over their shoulders and see it. Just barely, a tiny green sprout poking from the damp barley. The room exhales. Someone laughs. Another claps her hands. Also, the woman being tested doesn't say much. She presses her fingers to her lips, closes her eyes, and turns her face toward the sun. Her journey has begun. But as you stand there, basking in the quiet joy of ancient discovery, another question creeps in. What happened when things didn't go according to plan? You follow the thread of that thought to a smaller, more hidden part of the village, a cluster of low stone walls with faded paintings and water jars stacked neatly in rows. Here, women came not to celebrate fertility, but to grieve its absence. Infertility was more than a private sorrow. In ancient Egypt, it was often interpreted as divine judgment. You didn't just fail to conceive, you were being punished. Perhaps your ancestors were displeased. Maybe you had unknowingly broken a taboo. Or maybe a spirit had curled into your womb and locked the door from within. One particularly odd theory blamed demons that traveled through the air and entered women at night. To prevent this, some women slept with amulets around their necks or even wore carved hippo tusk girdles across their hips, shaped like the goddess Taweret, the protector of childbirth. And then there were the public rituals. In some temple cities, women desperate for children would visit the sanctuaries of Hathor or Isis, crawling on their knees and presenting offerings milk, bread, incense, even strands of their own hair. A few would write their pleas on small ostraca shards of pottery and leave them beneath statues or buried under temple steps. Let my womb be opened. Grant me one child. Even if I die in labor, make me fertile like the river. Some scholars think these acts were both religious and therapeutic, a way for women to reclaim a sense of control in a life ruled by the whims of nature and gods. But not all women accepted their fate quietly. There are rare but powerful tales of women who defied the social order, who declared that their worth did not lie in childbirth alone. One such woman, her name lost to history, was said to have become a healer herself, learning the secrets of herbs and midwifery not to bring life into her own body, but to guide others through theirs. She brewed bitter teas from castor beans and date pits. Some say she mixed crushed acacia thorns with beer to induce abortions. Others say she worked in secret, helping women escape forced marriages by feigning pregnancies or illnesses. Historians still debate whether these tales are based on real individuals or are myths crafted by later scribes, echoes of resistance whispered through time. You walk past a stone basin, its surface worn smooth by centuries of hands drawing water. Nearby, a figure carved into the wall gazes outward, eyes wide, belly round. She's no goddess, just a woman, frozen in the middle of becoming something more. That's the thing about ancient life. It's not only the spectacular that lingers, it's the quiet. The rituals repeated under breath, the wisdom passed in murmurs, the hope hidden in barley grains and prayers scratched on a pottery. As the sun climbs higher, you take shelter beneath an awning of woven reeds. A cat pads by silent, aloof, watching everything. It was believed that cats guarded the home from evil forces, including those that might threaten pregnancies. One papyrus even claims that sleeping beside a cat ensured a smooth labor. You try not to picture the modern consequences of taking that advice too literally. The midwife returns, carrying a fresh bundle of herbs myrrhs, mint, and something bitter you can't quite place. She nods toward the sprouting grain and says something in a language older than language itself. You don't need to understand. The meaning is clear. Life goes on, even when it doesn't arrive, even when the barley stays silent, even when the prayers echo unanswered. Because in this ancient world, just as in yours, belief is a bridge, a way to walk across the gap between what is and what could be. You close your eyes and listen to the soft rustle of papyrus leaves above you. The Nile murmurs somewhere in the distance. Life stirs, fades, returns, and maybe, just maybe, somewhere in the quiet, a new sprout begins its reach toward the sun. The scent of the Nile at dusk is unlike anything you've ever known. It's a blend of damp earth, crushed lotus petals, and something ancient like the breath of time itself. As you follow a narrow path toward the village edge, lanterns flicker to life in clay holders, casting warm orange glows across the walls. Tonight, the elders gather to recount the ways the gods once walked among men. But you're here for something a little more grounded, though, just as mystical. You find yourself standing before a modest structure, its mud brick walls adorned with faint painted hieroglyphs. This was once a scribe's home, a man tasked not with royal decrees or tax records, but something much more intimate. He transcribed medical wisdom. Step inside, and the cool air wraps around you. Piles of papyri are stacked carefully, some tied with faded linen cord. These were not just documents, they were lifelines. Ailments of the body, troubles of the womb, and instructions for detecting a pregnancy long before a swelling belly gave it away. One such papyrus, though you'll never see it by name, contained detailed methods for pregnancy testing using barley and emmer wheat. You already know the basics. But here, in the quiet of the scribe's chamber, you uncover a peculiar twist. Some copies of the test included a third grain, lentils. According to the scroll, if the woman's urine caused lentils to sprout quickly, the child would be a girl. Barley, a boy. No sprouting, no child. You raise a brow at this proto-gender reveal party. Even in antiquity, Humans couldn't resist guessing. The test's inclusion of multiple grains wasn't just about accuracy, it reflected deep symbolism. Barley stood for strength and warriors, traits the ancients associated with boys. Lentils, seen as delicate and nourishing, were aligned with the nurturing qualities of girls. But there's more. Alongside these instructions, the papyrus lists curious side notes, probably the scribe's own additions. If barley and lentils both sprout, twins are possible. Or this gem. Should the barley sprout first? The child shall be quick of temper. It reads less like science, more like grandmotherly wisdom. Only 3. Yesu Bidon years older. Historians still argue whether these notations were folklore or sincere diagnostic belief. Some suggest they were proto-astrological in nature, linking plant responses to destiny. Others believe they were included simply to offer hope, to pad the silence between uncertainty and proof. While you sit, thumbing the edge of a brittle scroll, a moth flutters by, disturbed by your presence. The air here is thick with parchment dust and reverence. And yet, it's not all mystery. Some of the entries are surprisingly pragmatic. One passage describes how the temperature of a woman's urine could indicate not just pregnancy, but health, cool like river morning. She thrives. Hot as midday sand. She is cursed. You suppress a smile. Ancient thermometer logic. Yet among these insights are darker truths. Some scrolls advise on what to do if a pregnancy is unwanted. Recipes involving soaked papyrus rolled in honey and placed inside the body. Oils mixed with cedar resin. Even powdered stone. These weren't careless acts. They were, in their time, desperate solutions to a life where women had little agency. You can almost hear the unspoken tension in the scribe's brushstrokes. Caught between knowledge and obedience, medicine and taboo. Outside, a jackal howls in the distance. You think of Anubis, god of embalming and protector of the dead, often invoked to guide the souls of stillborn children. In one scroll's margin, a tiny figure is drawn half dog, half man cradling an infant in his arms. A footnote. A prayer. You sit for a while longer, the quiet pressing in like warm linen. Your mind drifts to modern times and just how much we still rely on tests, signs, and superstitions. The packaging may have changed, but the question is the same. Am I carrying life? One thing hasn't changed. The need to know, to peer just a little further down the path of what might be, whether it's pea on a stick or grains in a basket. That desire so personal, so human echoes through time. And here you are, eavesdropping on it. Centuries later, listening to the rustle of scrolls and the silent sighs of people long gone, all bound together by the same hope, the same fear. You gently close the scroll and place it back in its resting spot. Dust motes dance in a sliver of moonlight slicing through the doorway. The night deepens. The story continues. You step back into the evening, the soft dirt still warm beneath your feet. The sounds of the village begin to settle. A distant laugh, a donkey's bray, the splash of water against pottery. But your path takes you away from these domestic murmurs, toward a more solemn destination. A temple clinic at the heart of medical mystery. By torchlight, the temple looms. Not grand like Karnak or Luxor, but modest, reserved for healing and consultation. Its walls are inscribed not just with prayers, but with diagrams rudimentary, elegant outlines of the human body, limbs drawn in profile, uteruses depicted like sacred jars. You run your fingers along a depiction of a woman lying beneath a crescent moon, arms across her belly, eyes closed in serenity or pain. It's unclear. Inside, rows of stone benches form a semicircle around a single raised platform. This was not for ritual sacrifice or judgment, but consultation, a blend of divine guidance and practical care. Here, women came with questions about fertility, illness, and dreams. Yes, dreams. Because in ancient Egypt, the lines between medicine and mysticism were thin. If you dreamt of holding a lotus, you might be with child. If you dreamt of bleeding fish, trouble was near. Dream interpretation wasn't a spiritual luxury, it was diagnostic protocol. Priest-physicians, known as Sunu, served here. Part doctor, part priest, part therapist. Their tools, bowls of honey, knives of obsidian, bundles of herbs tied with flax. Their wisdom, drawn from scrolls and stars alike. Tonight, you find a set of carvings documenting a particularly strange pregnancy test involving crocodile dung. Yes, really, the woman would mix the dung with natron salt and place it near the genitals, not internally, but close enough to absorb supposed vapors. If she became nauseous within the hour, the test was positive. You wince at the thought, but that's not even the strange part. The most bizarre detail is the belief that the crocodile itself, if spotted after the ritual, was a spiritual confirmation, a divine nod. There's even a record of temple guards being tasked with watching the river, waiting for one to appear. Historians still argue whether these rituals were taken literally, or if they served more psychological purposes, comforting the anxious, offering some illusion of control. Were these tests truly believed to detect life, or were they ancient forms of emotional triage? Nearby, you find a list of herbs used as fertility enhancers: fenugreek, acacia, anise, but next to these familiar names are stranger ones. Blood of the red ibis, probably not literal. Ashes of the sacred hoopoe, possibly more symbolic than pharmacological. The Sunu were as much poets as practitioners. In a corner of the temple is a shelf of small statues, each representing a different goddess of childbirth. Hathor, with her cow's ears and endless smile. Taweret, the protective hippo goddess who guarded mothers during labor. Some of the statues are worn smooth from touch tokens gripped tight in moments of prayer and pain. You remember earlier? In the scribe's house? The note about lentils. It resurfaces now. These symbols, plants, dreams, animals repeat like lullabies, weaving familiarity into fear. For women without modern answers, these rituals offered a sense of being seen, even if not understood. One record mentions a woman who visited the temple every new moon, laying out small offerings of bread and milk on the altar. Her name is lost, but her devotion remains etched in a quiet prayer. Let what grows in me not wither. The candle beside that inscription flickers low, and for a moment, you think you smell scorched papyrus? You're not alone in the rooms. Not really. There's a heaviness here, the kind that settles in places where hope has lingered too long. And yet, there's peace too. You sit on one of the benches and look up at the ceiling painted like the night sky, stars mapped in lapis and gold. A reminder that before telescopes, people still looked up and wondered. Your eyes return to the floor, and there a tiny basket used in one of the sprouting tests. It's cracked, woven reeds fraying at the edges. You imagine the women who once held it, hearts racing as they waited. Not for a plus sign or a digital beep, but for a green sprout. Life from seed, life from them. You rise slowly, bow slightly to the altar, not from belief, but from respect. Outside, the night is still young, but it feels ancient. A breeze carries the scent of desert sage. So you walk again, away from the temple, carrying with you the weight of ancient questions, the ones that never change, the ones that, perhaps, never really need to be answered. You follow a narrow path back toward the Nile, your sandals brushing softly over dust that hasn't moved in centuries. The moon has shifted slightly, casting longer shadows as you approach a riverside market that once thrived with barter and banter. But tonight, it is silent. Empty stalls stretch like skeletons of forgotten trade. The scent of dried fish and old papyrus lingers faintly, a ghost of commerce. Here's where things get interesting. In your modern mind, markets are about buying food, spices, maybe a nice necklace. But in ancient Egypt, markets were also places for exchanging urine. Yes, the most ancient pregnancy tests often required the woman's urine to be poured over particular grains, typically barley and emmer wheat. The idea was simple. If one grain sprouted and the other did not, the woman was pregnant. If neither grew, she wasn't. If both did, maybe twins. You kneel beside a weathered crate, imagining the grain sacks once stored here. Seeds that held not only the potential of food, but answers. It's oddly beautiful. The same grain that fed the family could also reveal the next member of it. This test was recorded in the Berlin Papyrus, a document that's over 500 years old. But the real kicker? In the 20th century, scientists tested it and it worked. Sort of. Modern studies suggest that pregnant urine may contain hormones that could slightly stimulate seed germination. It's not as fast as a stick turning pink, but it's something. Historians still argue whether these tests were widespread or more localized to certain temples or cities. Some believe they were passed down orally, outside official medical texts. Others suggest that women practiced these in secret, away from the patriarchal gaze of priests and scribes. You rise and move down the line of old stalls, your hands brushing over scarred wood. There's a hook with a cracked ceramic jug still hanging from it. You imagine someone collecting early morning dew, careful not to spill. Even water had to be precise for the sprouting ritual. A child's sandals rest beside the jug, so small they seem barely real, perhaps once belonging to a girl who watched her mother carry out the test. Too young to understand, but old enough to remember. These are the kinds of details that never get written down, but linger past from glance to gesture, from generation to generation. As you walk on, a small figure catches your eye, an old woman etched into the corner of a clay relief. She's hunched, kneeling beside a sprout. One hand hovers above it, as though waiting for it to grow by sheer will. No name is given. No date. Just the scene. There's something almost sacred about it. The quiet hope. The domestic magic. You pause at the river's edge, The water glistens like obsidian in the moonlight. Reeds rustle gently, as if whispering, and just there, beneath a palm tree, a set of pottery shards lays half buried in the sand. You piece them together mentally, a bowl, perhaps. Used to hold the soaked grains, one edge is painted with a single curved line, a half circle, a womb, a sun, or simply decoration. Nearby, a crocodile watches from the water, eyes just above the surface. You wonder if its ancestors were once divine participants in rituals like the dung test. It blinks, unimpressed, and slides silently away. And then you notice it etched into the rock by the riverbank. A tiny, delicate handprint, child-sized, faded by centuries of wind and water, but still present. Who placed it there? A mother hopeful for a child hoping to grow strong, or just someone long ago, leaving a mark because that's what we do when we feel small in a big world. These echoes of life, of fears and futures intertwined, linger more powerfully than any grand statue. You sit for a moment, letting the night wrap around you. You think about how different these people were, and how exactly the same. A boat glides by in the distance, its lantern bobbing like a slow heartbeat. Somewhere on board, someone may be whispering prayers to Tauret, or Hathor, or simply watching the stars. Asking the same questions you turn from the river, your shadow long behind you, and walk back toward the stone path. The dust rises gently at your steps. Your thoughts, full of barley sprouts and ancient handprints, remain anchored to the banks of this ever-knowing Nile. The sky is turning a deeper shade of indigo now, and the stars above you seem to multiply with each step. You find yourself approaching a small building carved into limestone, modest from the outside. But what it holds inside whispers of sacred intimacy. You enter quietly, brushing your fingers along the smooth, cool walls. This was once a midwife's chamber, not a temple, not a palace, but a place just as vital. In ancient Egypt, midwives were more than birth attendants. They were keepers of secret knowledge, passed down like heirlooms, recipes, techniques, prayers, and, of course, diagnostic rituals. You move slowly across the room, where a worn stool sits beside a low bed of reeds, now collapsed under time's weight. On a wooden shelf are carved dolls, tiny statuettes of the goddess Tauret, half hippopotamus, half lioness, full protector of mothers and children. You gently lift one, the weight oddly comforting in your palm. It's here you learn something surprising. Egyptians may have also observed changes in a woman's eyes to detect pregnancy. Yes, the eyes. According to some texts, they believed that if the woman's eyes became glassy or displayed visible veins, it was a sign of conception. Peculiar. Maybe. But when you think about it, even today we associate brightness or dullness in the eyes with healths. Historians still argue whether this eye inspection technique was truly believed to be medical, or if it leaned more towards spiritual interpretation. Were these signs read like omens, or measured with experience? You peer into a cracked bronze mirror left behind, warped by age, but still capable of reflecting light. Your own reflection stares back with curiosity, and just for a moment, you imagine what it would be like to trust your fate to such signs. In the corner, a small fire pit has collapsed, its ashes long cold, but scattered around it are pieces of colored linen blue, red, and faded green. Some scholars believe midwives use specific colored cloths to signify stages of pregnancy, health warnings, or success in labor. Others argue it was just coincidence. Yet here they are, the color still clinging to stone like echoes. You kneel and pick up one piece. It's blue, with a tiny embroidered lotus near the corner. Perhaps the woman who wore it prayed for a boy. Perhaps it was just her favorite. As you sit by the dusty hearth, your mind drifts to another ancient Egyptian belief that the womb was directly connected to the rest of the body through channels, or matu. They imagined these as a kind of internal canal system, not unlike the irrigation routes that crisscross their fields. If a woman was ill or infertile, it was believed the metu were blocked or misdirected. Oddly enough, some of their metaphors mirror modern anatomy, albeit poetically misunderstood. It's as though they were groping toward a truth they could almost sense, but not quite grasp. Historians still debate how much of this anatomical theory came from observation and how much from pure symbolism. After all, water ruled their world. Why not the body too? You notice a pile of old papyrus scraps stuffed between stones, perhaps discarded notes or experimental recipes. One lists herbs: fennel, garlic, juniper. You recognize some from the kitchen of the village healer earlier in your walk. These herbs weren't just flavor, they were life tools. Some stimulated menstruation, others quieted cramps, and a few, possibly abortifacients. Quiet options in a world without clinics. The firelight in your imagination flickers gently. casting dancing shadows on the wall. You see women huddled here, exchanging advice, grief, laughter. It's easy to forget that medicine in the ancient world wasn't cold. It was communal. It was whispered over boiling pots and sung in lullabies. There's a lull in the air now, as though even the ghosts of this place have paused to rest. A soft breeze slips through a narrow slit of a window, carrying the faint smell of sand and something sweet, perhaps dried dates or honey cakes long since gone. You stand and stretch, taking one last look at the small altar at the back. A figure of Hathor stands there, cow-eared and serene, her hands lifted in perpetual offering as the goddess of motherhood, music, and joy. A reminder that even in the shadows of uncertainty, there was still celebration, still hope. You step outside, and the wind greets you gently. The landscape before you rolls out wide and open, dotted with low stone huts and swaying palm trees. Somewhere, a child giggles, perhaps in your memory, perhaps in your dream. The moon is higher now. Your journey is far from over, but you feel it slowing, deepening, and somewhere behind you, on that stool beside the reed bed, you can almost hear the soft murmur of advice passed from one woman to another. A ritual as ancient as time. The sand crunches gently under your feet as you continue along the winding Nile-side path. And now the scent of herbs grows stronger this time, sharp and pungent. You glance to your left and spot what looks like a modest apothecary, half crumbled but still proud. A flat roof, a half-opened wooden shutter, and in front, clay jars perched on a stone ledge like ancient sentinels. You step inside. It's dim and cool, the air thick with the ghost of incense and dried plants. You brush past a hanging bundle of mint, nearly brushing your face. And then you see them rows of ceramic vessels painted with crude depictions of plants, animals, and symbols. These were once the lifeblood of fertility rituals and early medical concoctions. Somewhere between a pharmacy and a temple, this room once held a curious blend of science and superstition. Tonight, you're here to learn about a curious custom, the barley and emmer wheat test, perhaps the earliest recorded pregnancy test in human history. And yes, it came from the Egyptians. Women would urinate on seeds of barley and emmer over several days. If either sprouted, it was said the woman was pregnant, if only one type grew. They might even predict the baby's sex: barley for a boy, emmer for a girl. Modern experiments have actually confirmed that urine from pregnant women can promote seed germination due to hormonal changes. It's one of those rare cases where ancient intuition overlaps accidentally with modern science. Still, historians argue whether this test was widely trusted or merely one of many overlapping rituals. After all, even in ancient Egypt, you'd probably hedge your bets. Behind the counter lies a shallow bowl stained with something dark, maybe wine, or pomegranate juice, or blood. No need to guess too hard. Bloodletting had its place here too. Though mostly associated with balancing humors in later Greek and medieval practice, some Egyptians believed releasing bad blood could correct fertility issues or menstrual imbalances. Whether it helped or hurt, well, historians still debate its true purpose. You pick up a dried bundle labeled with hieratic scribbles. It smells earthy. Wormwood. Maybe a bitter herb once used in rituals and medicine. Egyptian women may have chewed specific plants to either promote or prevent conception, depending on the moment. Depending on the need, there were even pessaries made from dates, honey, and crocodile dung. Yes, crocodile dung. It was dried and mixed into a paste, then inserted as a primitive form of birth control. You wince slightly at the image. But then, you remember the stakes. In a world without certainty, without scans or pills or due dates, women relied on knowledge passed from hands to hands, mouth to ear, like treasure. A set of wooden tongs catches your eye. Oh no, their purpose, hard to say. Perhaps for handling hot coals, or lifting boiling linen compresses, or extracting something more delicate. Everything here feels like part of a living system, designed for the body but interpreted through the lens of symbol and hope. Overhead, a string of dried figs hangs limp. You smile. Some believe figs boosted fertility. Others claim they symbolized female sexuality itself: soft, sweet, abundant. Ancient people may have known little about vitamins, but they understood metaphor like poetry. You make your way toward the back, where a low shelf holds what seems to be children's toys rattles. Carved animals, a spinning top, likely left by a mother, or made by an artisan with hopes that such objects would one day be held by tiny hands. One of the rattles has a cat's face etched on it, perhaps a nod to Bastet, the feline goddess of home and fertility. You gently shake it once. The sound is soft, soothing, like a heartbeat in clay. And again, the image of the barley test returns to you. You imagine a woman waiting beside her little tray of seeds, day after day, eyes scanning for the smallest sign of life. Not unlike modern pregnancy tests, really, except with more sunlight, more dirt, more ritual. Outside, the breeze rustles the palm fronds. You glance through the narrow slit of a window and see the Nile glowing faintly in the moonlight. A heron lifts into the sky. Slow and deliberate, you sit on the apothecary's stool, your fingertips dusted in ground herb and the powdery ghost of petals. You realize how much of ancient Egyptian medical care wasn't about precision. It was about patterns, cycles, waiting, observing, believing. Historians still wonder whether the people themselves believed in the power of these methods, or whether it was the community's belief that gave them meaning. Was the test useful because it worked, or because everyone agreed it might? You sigh softly. Even today, we still search for signs. We still hope quietly, privately, for tiny sprouts in the dark soil of the unknown. The jars seem to lean closer around you, each with its own whisper of a time long past, of breath held, of lives begun or not begun. The air in the room seems heavier now, not in a stifling way, more like a weighted blanket drawn gently over your thoughts. You rise slowly, brush your hands on your tunic, and move toward the doorway. The smell of mint follows you out. Or maybe it's memory. Maybe it's just part of the journey now. You walk out into the hushed warmth of the late Egyptian night. The apothecary fades behind you, swallowed by the shadows of mud brick walls and overhanging palms. The stars above still shimmer like ancient embers in a velvet sky. And ahead, a narrow passage winds toward another curious part of this world. The birthing chamber. No hieroglyphs announce its presence. No towering statue guards its door. But the scent of warm oil and linen greets you even before you step inside. This chamber feels more sacred than medical. A small raised platform sits in the center, covered in faded cloths, each one etched with faint symbols of life and protection. Around the walls, painted murals of Hathor and Teweret. Goddesses of motherhood and childbirth watch quietly. Taweret, the hippo lioness protector of expectant mothers, grins with eternal mischief from her painted perch. Tonight, you are not just learning how the Egyptians tried to understand fertility. You're witnessing how they tried to usher life into the world itself. In ancient Egypt, childbirth was equal parts ritual and reality. Women gave birth squatting on bricks, yes. Literal birthing bricks which supported them as gravity did its job. These bricks were often inscribed with blessings or placed upon protective spells. Midwives and female attendants guided the labor, offering chants, prayers, and occasionally biting down on amulets or reciting magical texts meant to untie the knots of the womb. You crouch down beside one of the birthing bricks now. It's chipped, worn, and yet feels undeniably intimate. You can imagine the hands that clutched it, the breathless moments of pain and anticipation. One peculiar tradition involved creating clay figures of protective deities, then standing them in a circle around the woman in labor. Like divine bodyguards, they were tasked with repelling evil spirits, especially demons like Amen, or malevolent jinns, that were believed to target vulnerable women and newborns. Historians still debate how widespread these supernatural precautions were. Some believe they were common only among the elite. Others suggest the line between magic and medicine was simply too blurred to define. And then there's the curious matter of naming. Egyptians often didn't name a baby until several days after birth, sometimes longer. Infant mortality was high, and hope was cautious. A name was power, and to bestow it too soon risked heartbreak. You move closer to the far wall, where a table holds relics from the act itself, an obsidian knife used to cut the cord, a ceramic basin for washing the newborn, and a cloth soaked in what might have been wine or antiseptic herbs. Even here, with all their beliefs in gods and fate, the Egyptians took steps to cleanse, to protect, to prepare. In one corner rests a reed basket, simple, woven, almost flimsy, but you already know the story this basket carries. Because it was into something like this that baby Moses was placed. If the tale is to be believed, a desperate mother, a river, a hope wrapped in cloth. You pause. The symbolism of that act, placing a child into the unknown, trusting water, and will echo strangely with the barley test you saw earlier. So much of ancient life was surrender. To nature, to the gods, to time. Suddenly, you hear the soft creak of a door behind you. No one enters, but you get the sense of something watching, or perhaps remembering. You aren't intruding, you're witnessing. There's another odd detail that catches your eye. A narrow scroll tucked into a shelf. On it are drawn herbs alongside detailed instructions, almost like a birth plan. Ancient texts, some scholars say, even suggested using incense to open the womb, or chanting specific vowels believed to resonate with the body's energy fields. You smile. It's so human, so desperate and beautiful. The way we reach for comfort when confronting the unknown. You sit gently on the platform now. The same place where countless women may have gripped fabric or hand or air. You imagine the noise, the low hum of prayers, the hushed encouragement, the hopeful, strained silence between contractions. And when the baby arrived, there was celebration but always guarded. In a land where life depended on the Nile's mood, joy came with a prayer that tomorrow would still come. A clay figurine on a ledge shows a woman cradling a baby. Both figures are stylized, but the emotion is clear. Head bowed, arms tight, as if saying, "This one made it." You notice another figurine nearby this time, of a frog. Weird, right? Not exactly the animal you'd expect in a maternity ward, but the frog was sacred to Heket, goddess of fertility and childbirth. Frogs, you see, emerged in droves after the Nile's flooding, seen as symbols of abundance and new life. Some women even wore frog-shaped amulets during pregnancy. Historians still argue whether these symbols were seen as literal protectors or simply emotional talismans. Something to clutch when the waves of labor grew too sharp. You breathe in slowly. The room now thick with lavender and aged oil. The walls seem to hold their breath, too. A small ceramic dish sits at the edge of the table. In it, probably remnants of honey, used to soothe a newborn's mouth, or maybe to offer the gods, or maybe just a sweet gesture in a world that was often anything but. You leave the chamber quietly. You don't want to disturb the ghosts, not of the mothers, not of the midwives, not of the babies who came through this world wrapped in linen and hope. You step out under the stars again. The Nile whispers in the distance, and the desert holds its silence like a lullaby. You follow a winding dirt path now, guided only by the cool hush of night air and the distant ripple of the Nile. Your feet crunch gently over pebbles as you pass low stone walls and the flickering shadows of date palms. Up ahead, a small, rounded building comes into view, built not for grandeur but for healing an ancient Egyptian clinic. Though it resembles nothing like the sterile hospitals you're used to. Inside, it smells of incense, clay, and something faintly sharp like crushed herbs. You notice shelves packed with scrolls, pots sealed with beeswax, and stacks of linen that haven't been touched in centuries. This was the realm of the SWNW, the physicians of ancient Egypt. Despite their early timeline, these healers were surprisingly methodical. Egyptian medical texts like the famous Eber's Papyrus contained hundreds of remedies, diagnoses, and treatment methods. They even recorded the difference between curable and incurable diseases. You sit by one of the benches and run your fingers over the carvings. Lists of symptoms, written in tidy columns, some marked with red ink to draw attention. One mainstream fact historians admire: Egyptians knew how to take a pulse. They understood that the heart was central to life, and that it pumped blood through channels they called MMATW. They may not have known anatomy like later civilizations, but they sensed the rhythm of the body and tried to harmonize with it. A soft breeze brushes your skin as you peek into a side room filled with strange instruments. Bronze hooks, carved wooden spatulas, tubes made of reeds. There's a quiet reverence here, as if these tools are still waiting to be used. Some were meant for surgery, others for dental work. Yes, dental. The Egyptians were possibly the first people to treat toothaches with fillings made of resin and even a form of cement. Not exactly Novocaine, but still impressive. And then there's the weirder stuff. One preserved scroll describes a treatment for migraines involving crocodile fat and crushed poppies, smeared across the patient's temples while they inhale incense made of frankincense and myrrh. It's unclear if the cure worked, but at least they'd smell festive. Historians still debate how scientific these remedies really were. Were they based on trial and error? Or did belief in magic shape their every choice? Some argue the Egyptians blended empirical knowledge with deep-rooted spiritual frameworks, refusing to separate body from soul. You brush dust from an alabaster jar and lift its lid. The contents have long since vanished, but the label remains. It once held honey, one of their most versatile ingredients. Antiseptic, soothing, long-lasting. Egyptians used it on wounds, in potions, and even as an offering to the gods. One of their oldest prescriptions was simply honey. Beer and herbs. Sounds suspiciously like a hangover cure, doesn't it? You shift to a table where the head physician might have sat. A carved lion's paw serves as the table leg, a symbol of power and healing. A worn stylus lies nearby, its reed nib cracked with time. Beside it, a sheet of papyrus details a curious ritual, placing a cooked mouse on a sore tooth. Apparently, the heat helped draw out pain, or at least distracted the patient. Among the strangest finds are jars once used to store animal parts, not just crocodile fat, but gazelle dung, oxbile, and occasionally, bits of hippo. You can't help but raise an eyebrow. There's wisdom here, sure, but also a fair bit of what were they thinking? And yet, you realize something else. These doctors kept records. They observed patterns. They cared enough to document what worked and what didn't. In a world ruled by gods and sandstorms, that alone feels like a small rebellion, an attempt to understand suffering and maybe even stop it. You pause beside a painting on the wall. It shows Imhotep not just a physician, but an architect and priest, later worshipped as a god of healing. He's shown holding a scroll, eyes calm, as if whispering that knowledge is eternal. It's comforting. Really, to think that someone 3,000 years ago was trying to figure it all out too. A whisper of laughter floats in your mind as you imagine a patient arriving, clutching their side and demanding the poppy fat incense combo, convinced it worked better during a full moon. Or the mother who swore by date syrup compresses for sore feet because her grandmother said so. Some things never change. You leave the clinic slowly, stepping past reed curtains and weather-worn jars. The stars above seem brighter now, as if to reward your curiosity. You wonder how many of these ancient cures paved the way for modern medicine and how many were lost to time, buried beneath drifting sand. Outside, a cool breeze brushes your cheek. In the distance, you hear the call of a nightbird. The Nile, patient and ancient, still flows as it always has, carrying memories, medicine, and myths downriver into the unknown. You continue along the Nile's path, the river murmuring beside you like an old friend telling secrets in the dark. The moonlight paints the water silver as you pass a cluster of modest homes made of sun-baked mud brick. But something strange stops you in your tracks, a low wall, carved with alternating rows of ankhs and cobras, encircling a compound not for worship, but for bureaucracy. Welcome to the Egyptian House of Records. Yes, even in the age of pharaohs and pyramids, paperwork ruled the world, and Egyptians were meticulous record keepers. Every birth, every barley harvest, every tax owed on fish caught in a canal was written down, usually by scribes who spent decades mastering the art of writing in hieroglyphs and hieratic script. In fact, to be a scribe in ancient Egypt was to hold power. You weren't just a secretary, you were the memory of the kingdom. Inside, you find narrow rooms stacked with papyrus rolls, ink pots, and styluses shaped from reeds. One scroll you gingerly unroll lists inventory from a temple. 4 white bowls, 2 jars of cedar oil, 9 baskets of dates. Another records attendance of workers at a tomb project, complete with absences and reasons. One man had stomach pain, another was bitten by a scorpion. And, amusingly, one simply brewed beer priorities. A mainstream fact that might surprise you: Egypt's government tracked everything. Taxes weren't paid in coins. They didn't use coinage till the late period, but in goods grain, livestock, honey, and linen. This made scribes critical. They assessed and recorded who owed what, to whom, and when. But here's a quirky twist. Their bureaucracy didn't stop at temple supplies or farm tallies. Some surviving documents reveal divorce settlements, labor strikes, even pyramid construction delay notices. Imagine a 3,000-year-old sticky note. Team sees late no copper tools today. You chuckle softly as you pass a partially legible document from Deir el Medina, the artisan village near the Valley of the Kings. It mentions a scribe mediating a dispute over a missing loaf of bread. Tempers flared. The loaf was reportedly too small. And yes, this was recorded. Forever. Historians still argue whether this bureaucracy was a form of proto-democracy or merely tight top-down control. Some believe temple scribes wielded genuine influence, especially when dealing with estate inheritance or labor complaints. Others say the system mostly served to keep the grain flowing to the elite and the monuments rising for the gods, or rather, for the kings who became gods. You imagine a day in the life of one of these scribes. Rise with the sun, wash in the river, sit cross-legged with ink made of soot and gum, transcribing lists until your fingers cramp. A far cry from the romantic image of hieroglyphs as mystical symbols. Most of their work was closer to Excel spreadsheets on papyrus. And yet, they loved their craft. One scribe wrote that being a scribe was better than farming in the sun or fighting in war. Another claimed it was the key to immortality because your words, your name, would live on. And they were right. You're reading their notes now. Millennia later, you lift a papyrus from a cracked jar and glimpse an unusual phrase. Beware the tall man from Nubia who steals ducks. It might have been part of a trade warning or just a neighborhood rumor formalized with ink. Either way, it's oddly charming. Beside the exit hangs a painted wooden plaque honoring Thoth, the ibis-headed god of writing and wisdom. Scribes often made offerings to Thoth before important transcriptions. You wonder how many prayers accompanied each scroll, and how many quiet moments of frustration when ink spilled or papyrus tore. Back outside, you feel the warm air settle around you like a cloak. You glance back at the compound. where nothing shines, nothing glitters, just old walls and dusty scrolls. Yet somehow, it all feels sacred. Here, words were currency, memory was power, and even the smallest complaint about a stolen goat could ripple through centuries. A frog croaks softly nearby. As if to break the spell, you smile. You keep walking. The night deepens as you continue your silent stroll past fields kissed by the Nile's overflow. A cool breeze rustles through papyrus reeds, and distant dogs bark lazily under a pale crescent moon. You come upon a structure not built of stone or brick, but of dried reeds, woven mats, and clay surprisingly humble for its purpose. You're at a birthhouse. And for a moment, the grandeur of pyramids and temples fades, replaced by the quiet marvel of ancient Egyptian childbirth. In these birthhouses attached to temples or constructed in village squares, women gathered for rituals and support when labor approached. Ancient Egyptian midwives, mostly women, weren't just assistants. They were guides, counselors, and healers. They'd whisper prayers to Taweret, the hippo-headed goddess of childbirth, while offering medicinal herbs and supporting the birthing woman's back with skilled hands. A mainstream fact often missed in textbooks. The Egyptians had a sophisticated understanding of women's health, including detailed medical papyri devoted entirely to gynecology. The Kahun Gynecological Papyrus from around 1800 BCE contains descriptions of contraception, pregnancy symptoms, and yes, even fertility testing. You step inside the hut, crouching slightly, and imagine a woman in labor, squatting on bricks while gripping the hands of older women around her. She would be surrounded by chants, amulets, incense, and a belief that the gods themselves guided her child safely into the world. But here's where it gets oddly specific. One ancient pregnancy test involved soaking barley and emmer wheat in a woman's urine to see which sprouted. Sprouting barley predicted a boy, emmer a girl. No sprouting at all. Not pregnant. Astonishingly, modern tests suggest it worked urine from pregnant women may indeed affect germination due to elevated estrogen levels. The image is strange but oddly poetic. In a world ruled by the sun, crops, and water, even pregnancy became an agricultural metaphor. Life growing from grain, a child, like a seed, blooming in time. And the test didn't stop there. Some included smelling a woman's breath or placing garlic near her womb and checking whether the scent reached her mouth. Folk science, perhaps, but layered with ritual and meaning. They didn't just want answers, they wanted reassurance from the divine. Historians still debate whether these tests were diagnostic tools, sacred rites, or a blend of both. Some argue the sprouting seeds were primarily symbolic, meant to invoke fertility rather than confirm it. Others suggest they were surprisingly empirical, reflecting Egypt's early experimentation with observation-based medicine. You notice a small wooden idol of Besh the Squat, lion-faced god who warded off evil spirits during childbirth, perched beside a pile of linen wraps and date paste. His grin is unnerving but oddly comforting, like a protective uncle watching over chaos with unwavering devotion. And chaos it was. Ancient childbirth was dangerous. No antiseptics, no doctors as we know them, only knowledge passed down orally and written in dusty scrolls. Yet somehow, the community created space for care, dignity, and ceremony. No woman labored alone. You brush your hand along a faint carving etched into the doorway. It shows a mother nursing her child under the watchful gaze of Isis, goddess of motherhood. The lines are faint, worn by generations, but the tenderness is unmistakable. There's something deeply moving in this forgotten corner of history. So much of what you've explored tonight was about pharaohs and power, scribes and systems. But here, in the hush of a small hut, life began not with gold, but with grain, breath, hope, and midwives whispering prayers into the night. Outside, a gentle clatter of reeds draws your gaze upward. Tower statues line the roof edge, warding off evil. You bow your head slightly, a quiet gesture of respect. Then you turn and walk on, deeper into the dream. Your footsteps crunch softly on the dust-packed ground as you leave the birthhouse behind. The village is asleep now, or so it seems. But the stillness is deceiving, and in the distance, the low beat of a drum pulses in the dark. A steady rhythm that leads you to the edge of another ritual space, this time veiled in incense smoke and flickering lamplight. You're approaching a healing shrine. Here, the ancient Egyptians practiced medicine as a seamless blend of science, superstition, and spiritual ceremony. They didn't draw hard lines between the physical and the metaphysical. A headache wasn't just pressure, it might be a curse. A stomachache wasn't indigestion, it could be the punishment of a god. The most common treatments, surprisingly thorough. Honey for wounds, its antiseptic properties well known even then. Moldy bread for infections. 2. A proto-antibiotic centuries ahead of its time. And for more complex cases, like infertility or prolonged fevers. There were temple doctors known as Sabu, trained to recite incantations while applying poultices, examining the pulse, or even performing minor surgeries. Tonight, you peer through a narrow doorway and see one such ritual underway. A patient lies still on woven mats, while a priest-physician draws circles in the air with an ankh, whispering to Imhotep, the deified healer and architect whose wisdom was said to surpass mortal understanding. Mainstream historians agree that Imhotep's influence was vast. He's often considered the first true physician in recorded history. But here's something curious. A few lesser-known scrolls suggest that temples like this also functioned as early mental health clinics. Yes, mental health in ancient Egypt. Priests believed that wandering wombs or disturbed hearts could cause a person's unrest. Patients were bathed in scented oils, sung to, and given dream therapy. Yes, literally interpreting dreams to understand inner turmoil. Whether this was therapy or theater remains uncertain. Historians still debate whether these sessions were effective healing practices or symbolic gestures to pacify the soul. Regardless, the intention was clear. Restore balance between body, mind, and the sacred. You step inside and smell lotus blossoms steeped in water. An apprentice is mixing crushed juniper and beer, another common prescription, while humming a tune passed down from healer to healer. Above him, painted on the wall, is a depiction of Sekhmet, the lioness goddess of plague and cure. Her eyes gleam with fire. Her hand holds a scroll of secret remedies. It's this tension between destruction and restoration that defines much of Egyptian medicine. The same gods who caused illness were also called upon to cure it. Faith and fear dance side by side. You take a seat near a shallow basin. Its edges are worn smooth by decades of use. Here, patients might have washed away disease real or imagined before entering the sanctuary to sleep, dream, and awaken cured. Or not. And what about those who weren't cured? What did comfort look like then? You spot a basket filled with amulets, the Eye of Horus, miniature scarabs, and tiny crocodiles, each one imbued with meaning, believed a shield against unseen harm. For some, that belief was enough to ease the pain. Others needed more. In the hush of this room, where light flickers across plaster and reed, you realize something profound. These ancient healers, however imperfect their tools, offered not just medicine, but meaning. They didn't always know what caused suffering, but they knew how to hold space for it. A small child sleeps nearby, clutching a linen doll shaped like Bez. His mother watches from the corner, her hand resting lightly on her chest in quiet prayer. The scene feels timeless. You close your eyes and imagine yourself as a patient. Hear your worries carried into the temple, your pulse checked with careful fingers, your sleep watched over by stone lions and lotus blossoms. In this world, healing is never just physical. It's a ritual, a story, a shared breath between human and divine. You step back into the night, the faint echo of prayers following you like a breeze. You're walking now through open desert again, the sky above swirled with stars. The sands whisper underfoot, and ahead, you see a low structure carved into a cliffside. Not a tomb this time, but something stranger, a house of dreams. The Egyptians called it the Per Ankh, the house of life. It was more than a library, more than a school. It was the nerve center of sacred knowledge. Here, papyrus scrolls were copied by hand, prayers were composed, and rituals refined. Only a select few scribes and priests were allowed inside, and their work was considered a holy act. Inside this place, you might find a scroll describing how to read a newborn's future based on the stars, or instructions for preparing a protective amulet using the feathers of a specific bird caught at moonrise. Or, perhaps most fascinating, you might find there meticulous records of dream incubation. Yes, dreams again. The ancient Egyptians placed extraordinary value on dreams. To them, dreams were a direct line to the divine, not metaphors, not muddled brain static, but messages. You kneel beside a low desk carved from stone. Imagine the scribe who once sat here. The air smells of ink and old linen. The stylus rests against a half-finished spell invoking Hathor to grant insight through dreams. The papyrus is soft, pliable, yet still legible millennia later. Historians agree that dream interpretation was woven into every major life decision from marriage and childbirth to business and burial rites. But some fragments suggest that specific temples used dream sleep for diagnostics. Lay down in the sacred chamber, speak your worries, fall asleep, and wait for the gods to respond. One peculiar story, rarely discussed outside dusty academic texts, tells of a man who dreamed of a golden ibis landing on his chest. When he awoke, the priest declared he was harboring a tumor in his lungs. The cure, a bath in milk and honey, followed by 7 nights of chants and fasting. Did it work? No one knows. Historians still argue whether such accounts were symbolic parables or genuine case records. Either way, the Egyptians believed it, and that belief shaped choices, entire lives. The house around you is quiet. You pass shelves stacked with bound reed scrolls. One shows a diagram of a woman giving birth under the stars, attended not by midwives but by goddesses in animal form Isis, Tawret, Nephthys, each bearing a gift: breath, courage, protection. You pause at a painted doorway. On it, in faded ochre, are instructions for an ancient sleep ritual. It begins with cedar smoke, continues with recitation of one's life story to the stars, and ends with lying down facing west, the land of the dead, so one's soul can wander and return safely by dawn. You wonder what modern physicians would think. Perhaps scoff at the lack of evidence, but perhaps also admire the gentleness, the intention, the time made for stillness. In this world, knowledge isn't hoarded. It's passed on, layered into stories and ink and song. The Parank is both a sanctuary and a seedbed, where wisdom is cultivated not for profit but for peace. A breeze rustles the edges of a scroll. You catch a glimpse of a note in the margin. She saw the hawk in her sleep. We gave her honey. Her fever broke. Simple, mysterious, unscientific, and yet somehow human. You imagine lying down in the space, surrounded by quiet reverence, by the careful work of 100 hands across generations. Outside, the moonlight drapes the desert in silver. Inside, you breathe in ink and history. And you understand, the House of Life was never just about knowing. It was about remembering to listen deeply, to wait gently, to trust that sleep could speak if only you made room for it. You stir now in the hush of a flickering chamber, lit only by the faint orange glow of oil lamps. The walls close in gently with hieroglyphs carved by patient hands centuries before your time. This is not a place of grandeur. No towering obelisks. No pyramids rising to the heavens. Just a quiet, hidden nook beneath a temple where one final ritual unfolds. Here, women once came in secret, not for healing or birth or prophecy, but for understanding themselves. In the ancient city of Memphis, archaeologists uncovered what appeared to be a private space connected to the goddess Hathor, protector of fertility, music, and joy. This modest room held mirrors, cosmetics, and most curious of all, a series of small statuettes, each showing a pregnant woman with wide, fearful eyes. These statues weren't merely decorative. They were tools. It's believed they played a part in divination rituals meant to confirm or deny pregnancy. The woman would bring an offering bread, milk, a lock of hair, and sit before Hathor's shrine. A priestess, serving as intermediary, would place the statuette in a basin of water and observe its movements, clouding or shifts. Today, that sounds like superstition, but for her, it was hope. It was truth. Historians still debate whether this rite was tied to known Barley and emmer tests, or if it stemmed from even older, oral traditions passed from mother to daughter. No one can agree. The records stop just as they start to shimmer with detail. But you imagine her there, knees drawn to chest, breath held, praying silently, wondering whether her body now carried two souls instead of one. A candle flickers beside her. The priestess whispers something soft, something sacred, and the water still as glass begins to ripple. Sometimes the signs were clear, other times ambiguous, much like dreams, like omens, like life itself in ancient Egypt. As you shift now, you recall how the ancients layered mystery upon practicality. Their pregnancy tests were not only biological but spiritual, not just rooted in science but embedded in narrative. Take, for instance, the curious case of the test of the onions, a lesser-known practice. It involved placing a sliced onion near a woman's womb overnight. If her breath carried the scent by morning, she was said to be fertile and open. Strange. Yes, but in a world without laboratories or ultrasounds, it was one more signal from the body they tried to interpret. And again, we return to belief. In ancient Egypt, belief wasn't blind faith, it was a system, one that merged observation with meaning. You didn't simply know a fact. You lived it. You listened to it. You allowed it to shape your choices, your rituals, even your sleep. Back in that small chamber, the oil lamp dies slowly. The statuette rests still in the water. The priestess has left. The woman rises. Does she know for certain? Perhaps not. But she leaves with something more powerful than answers. Permission to hope. And so do you. You've wandered temples and tombs. You've witnessed birth under stars and prayers spoken to reeds. You've seen tests brewed from grain and signs drawn in dreams. And through it all, you've seen one thing endure. Not science, not ritual, but care. They cared deeply about life, about beginnings, about meaning. Enough to try, Enough to imagine a world where a god might whisper through barley sprouts, or a hawk might warn of fever in a dream. And perhaps, in a way, they weren't wrong, because here you are now, thousands of years later, resting in the echo of their questions, letting their stories ease you into stillness. You smile faintly in the dark, touched by the soft absurdity of it all. So now, dear listener, let your breath slow. Let your chest rise and fall with the gentle rhythm of the Nile. You're lying somewhere in the cool shade of a reed-walled hut, where the air smells faintly of date palms and clay. Outside, the day fades. Inside, everything holds its breath like you feel the world soften like linen soaked in water, like grain crumbling under sunlight. Time stretches, uncoils, curls itself around your ankles like a cat. You remember the barley seeds? The crocodile ointments, the whisper of stars. You recall the woman waiting beside the lamp, and the scribe hunched over his scroll. All of them, across millennia, seeking something small and human. A sign, a certainty, a yes. And even now, as your own eyes grow heavy, you feel them here, not as ghosts or echoes, but as companions, sleepwalkers through time, dreamers, just like you. So let the story drift behind you like desert wind. Let your limbs sink deeper into rest. Let your thoughts unfurl, slow and gentle. You are safe. You are home. You are part of something ancient and soft and still unfolding. Now, close your eyes. Let go of the questions and sleep.